You heard just now the call to the federal government on a very particular series of issues around mental health and community safety. The dilemma that Canada has is that the federal government has all sorts of responsibilities and often no levers, as they will tell you. They don't have the levers because of the way we're structured constitutionally. And so it's very interesting to see how the Government of Canada has now weighed in on the housing issue in a significant way, looking at what levers it has. And so we're very fortunate to have 3 leaders from the public service engaged and public service adjacent to come and talk to us about what does this moment look like around the future of lands and buildings, and one of the levers that they do have. So would you welcome, please, Jennifer's going to go first. You can go to the slides and to the program and see people's bios to see what their backgrounds are. But Jennifer's going to take you through her particular piece, and then we'll hear from Mark when he magically arrives, and then Stefan, and then we'll have an open conversation about this set of opportunities that the federal government are grappling with. So thanks for coming to the City Building Summit, and over to you.
Sounds good. Good? Excellent. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Garrett, and I have a unique responsibility at the federal level. I work with Public Services and Procurement Canada, responsible as of January for Canada's Parliamentary Precinct modernization. I'd like to, just before I get started and launch into the slides, we're going to kill a little time here anyway. Could I have my colleagues that are here in the room, because I'm going to be a bit on the run today, Magda Haviatsky and Sandy Mitchell, who also work with me in the precinct. Please feel free to approach them if you don't see me around, and we would be happy to take any questions and comments back and do any follow-up that's required throughout the day. I'm going to take you through the slides, a few slides here, just to set the tone for the discussion that I'm able to have with you around what we're doing in the precinct, and I dare say, I'll brag a little bit, I think it's quite exciting. I'm going to try and handle a hand mic, my paper, and a clicker. And just this will resonate maybe later, here on time, we're an on time, on scope, on budget delivery organization. So just to remind everybody, I know people are mostly from the Ottawa area and the National Capital Region, but maybe just to set the tone for you in terms of the work that we do. People have thought about the precinct traditionally as the parliamentary triad, the Centre Block, West Block, and East Block, and basically the properties that are north of Wellington Street. But really, in terms of our Fair Representation Act and in terms of how government grows with time, actually, our Parliament is growing and will continue to grow. And so what we're seeing in terms of a trend and what we're faced with in the precinct in support of our Parliament is the fact that quite a number of members of Parliament will find themselves south of Wellington over the course of time. And so really, we've been focused on what's north of Wellington. We're very, very focused strategically on investing south of Wellington as well, which of course also abuts Spark Street. Hey. So what guides us in the work that we do? It's a multi-year, multi-decade, soon-to-be strategy that's been on the go in terms of execution for quite some time, and we've seen that theme to more. So we've been thinking about this and acting on this for several years, and it's starting to manifest in some really good results. What guides our work is what we call the long-term vision and plan. It is focused largely on the restoration of heritage assets, but also modernization of parliamentary operations to support a 21st century democracy and to support the growing needs of Parliament. But when we do that, we also can't remember that Parliament is just not about the parliamentary democracy that operates there, which is so essential for our country. But it is a public precinct, and everybody deserves a dignified welcome. So even though through the construction program that we've been working on in the precinct, we've been very focused on our planning and design efforts to make sure that we maintain that public realm, that it continues to be a very important investment and economic driver of the local economy, and that we continue to manifest a positive visitor experience, which also helps the local economy. Our plan in action, we lovingly internally call this the football map. It's essentially all the investments that we have made, are making, and will be making into the precinct. To give you the bottom line up front, the Pinnacle project, which was the focus of this long-term vision and plan to date, has been the revitalization and rehabilitation of the center block and construction of a 3.5-story underground facility in the front lawn. So for those of you that haven't been to our construction site through Open Doors Ottawa, we are participating this year in Open Doors Ottawa. Come and see that hole and see what we're building there. It'll be it's quite an exciting opportunity. I mention it because it is a key aspect. The full first floor of that Parliament Welcome Centre will provide core parliamentary functions, but also visitor functions focused on things like public exhibit space, theaters, the first ever public cafe. So many may not notice or have noticed, or if you've taken your family to the Hill, we do offer public tours. Parliament offers public tours, but because they are working democratic buildings, there's a limit to the number of tours that can be offered. And many, over 50% of the people that came to visit Parliament Hill previously were turned away because they could not get on a public tour. The whole point of the Parliament Welcome Centre is to make those investments so that there can be an engaging experience for Parliament to engage with those visitors and Canadians that come and see. So while I've indicated we're focused on the heritage, we are focused on public realm and positive visitor experience and seeing how that realm manifests itself in making a positive impact. And to that end, we're quite interested. We don't consider ourselves a stakeholder in that. We want to be partners in that. So really, we always keep these things in mind. It's not about the physical manifestation and the modernization. The work that we've done has manifested over 75,000 jobs to date. We established partnerships with universities across the country. And we're generating we want to be a leader in terms of sustainability and accessibility to make sure that all who visit have a dignified welcome. We've got several projects on the go. As I indicated, we have Centre Block and the Parliament Welcome Centre, which are actively under construction. We have launched Block 2, which is the centre block directly facing Parliament across from the centre block or across from the Centennial Flame. We're going to be building a facility there and revitalizing the heritage assets. That construction site will be standing up in the fall timeframe. And in the middle of that site, we have 100 Wellington, which is the Indigenous people's space, and we're working actively with our partners on that as well. In terms of focusing, as I indicated, that southward movement to support parliamentary accommodations to the south side of Wellington, that long-term vision and plan is really focused on taking a campus approach and making sure that we have good connections, that the whole campus, whether you're on the north or the south side of Wellington, is working well for both Parliament and contributing to the community. We see a great opportunity. Obviously, people are aware that Wellington Street runs right through the center of that campus, and we see great opportunities in terms of leveraging the work and the billions, which we've spent over $5 billion in investing in the precinct to date, in leveraging the future investments that we're going to make in the revitalization not only of Block 2, but the other blocks south of Wellington, to see what we can do to help revitalize adjacent streets like Sparks and Wellington. So in closure, I'll close by saying we want to be a partner. We see the synergy. We're not working in silos. We want to work with you, and we just think that there's potentially a bright future in a way that we can do work to both modernize parliamentary operations to support Canada's democracy and help the city and the National Capital Region. So thanks for listening to me, and look forward to chatting.
Thanks, Jennifer. You're going to go next, Mark, and I don't think I'm on, but does it matter? We're going to go to Mark next, and just a perfect example of the assets, test one, thank you, of the assets that you have to work with. This is an extraordinary asset that Jennifer's just been describing. $8 billion investment. It's extraordinary. Okay, Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. And it's a tough act to follow, Jennifer, but I'll do my best. Je pense qu'on a une période de questions et réponses. Je vais faire la majorité de mes commentaires en anglais, mais bien entendu, je sais qu'il y a un intérêt pour la réduction de portefeuille, les impacts sur le centre-ville d'Ottawa, la grande région, puis ça va me faire un énorme plaisir de pouvoir répondre à vos questions en français par la suite. So my name is Mark Quinlan. I'm the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister for Real Property at Public Services and Procurement Canada. I'm in charge of two large portfolios. One is what we call our engineering assets, which includes a lot of dams and bridges across the country, including bridges here in the National Capital area. But I'm also responsible for the office portfolio for the Government of Canada. So just to give you a perspective, the Government of Canada owns about 28 million square meters of space across the country. I'm responsible for roughly 7 million square meters of that space, so 25%. Of those 7 million, there's roughly 1 million for warehousing and special purpose space, which leaves 6 million square meters of office space. That office space is split roughly between 50% leased assets, so office space that we rent out from the private sector, probably many in the room, and then Crown-owned buildings that we own and operate for our public servants. That's across the country. In the National Capital Area, so Ottawa and Gatineau, we have roughly 3 million square meters, so 50% of the office space for the government is here. So in the budget, the government announced that it was going to right-size the federal footprint and reduce the office space by roughly 50% over the next 10 years. So my job is to take 6 million square meters of space down to 3 million square meters of space in 10 years. And the reason why we have the capacity to do that is mainly because of hybrid work, but not exclusively. So for those who know Ottawa, you may remember that before the pandemic, if you worked near a government building, you may have noticed that there wasn't a lot of foot traffic. And that's because a lot of the office space in the federal government before the pandemic was empty by about 40%. And why was that? The first reason is that we gave one workstation for every employee. We assigned workstations. Some of you probably work in environments where you have your own office. Some of you probably work in environments where you share offices based upon what you're doing. When we unassign offices, we're able to unlock an unbelievable amount of efficiency. Because every day, pre-pandemic, before teleworking, people were out of the office for a lot of legitimate reasons. They're on holiday, on training, traveling for work, sick leave, helping family members. And there's another thing that happened before the pandemic, and is that we would often plan for 10 years of space, and when we were planning for 10 years of space, we had to anticipate the possibility of growth. So if you're planning space for 1,000 employees, you might be fitting up space for 1,200 workstations. So if you combine the assigned workstation for every public servant, minus the extra capacity we actually didn't really need, minus all of the reasons why people were absent every day, well, you had half-empty office buildings before the pandemic. So what happened after the pandemic? Well, the government adopted a hybrid environment for the majority of employees. That's not true across the board because a lot of employees still work 5 days. But for the majority of the employees, it's 2 to 3 days. So when we're planning our office portfolio reduction, we're planning for 3 days in the office for 100% of employees. And by going to unassigned seating, we're able to put a lot more employees in the same office building. So what does that mean if you're interested in the small business sector or how busy the downtown core will be, et cetera? Well, that means that the office spaces we're going to stay in will have a much higher rate of use. So pre-pandemic, we were 50 to 60%. When we're done right-sizing the portfolio, we're going to be above 80%. So that foot traffic in and around those government offices is going to be a lot higher than it ever has been in the past. and should have a positive impact on the sectors where we are. And of course, talking to taxpayers and people that have an environmental conscience, the government plan reduction will also save, when we're done, close to $1 billion of taxpayer money, and of course have a positive impact on the government's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also by fitting up a lot less space, we're going to be using less planetary resources, and so having a positive impact on the environment from that perspective as well. And from an employee perspective, well, going into an empty office building isn't that fun. Going into an office building where there's a lot more activity and a lot more folks to interact with at your break and at your lunch, well, that will have a positive impact as well. So those, I will be glad to answer a lot of questions, but I wanted to kind of give you that vision on where we were going with the office portfolio reduction, how it's going to impact Ottawa-Gatineau, but also how I think it's going to have a very positive impact from a foot traffic perspective and an economic perspective where we're going to remain. Last thing I'll say is, of course, the long-standing 25-75% split across for folks across the river. Well, we're going to be maintaining that as we reduce our portfolio. I'll talk very briefly about a couple of other elements in the budget. One of the things that we did pre-budget is we put in place a special group to accelerate government disposals. So historically, the government is not very good at disposing surplus properties. What does a surplus property mean? If a department uses an asset, a building, and it no longer needs that building for operational reasons, it eventually decides to surplus that asset and determine that it no longer needs it. And normally there's a big process where we go to other government departments to figure out if they're interested, and we'll go to a number of different partners, the provinces, the municipalities, Indigenous partners, before we get to a place where we'd actually put it on the open market to sell it. That process takes a lot of time, and it was never the priority for most departments. On average, it takes 9 years to dispose of a government building. We want to split that minimally in half. I know you're still going to say 4 to 5 years to dispose of. Yes, a lot of good reasons for that. But we're also looking at ways to have, if it's the government's wish, to have exceptions to the current policy to direct the sale to accelerate disposals. So we put a group in place to do that, and we're working with other government departments to get a master list of surplus properties with a view of really accelerating all of the surplus properties across the country. That's a positive news for anybody who's interested in government efficiency, because why would you keep paying for an asset that you don't need to deliver government services? And while the government doesn't pay municipal taxes, we pay payment in lieu of taxes. And so the carrying costs for those assets, including the payment in lieu of taxes, are in the millions, of course. And as we accelerate and reduce our office space, we're going to be able to return those savings to departments to reinvest into services. But it'll also have a very positive benefit for the housing sector, because a lot of government office buildings have the high potential for the conversion into housing. And the government has asked us to focus on those assets in order to accelerate efforts. And my partner from the Canada Lands Corporation may talk about some of those opportunities. We've also been asked to look at underutilized assets. So you can imagine a large piece of land where there's one building on it, but where we could actually build a housing unit next to it. That may not be surplus because the asset itself is still being used by the government, but it would be underutilized. And so identifying those and getting those assets in the hands of developers will be really important. Last thing I'll say is the budget also asked us to, created a $500 million fund for us to go out and work with provinces and municipalities to acquire land that can be built on more rapidly. And if the government acquires a piece of land, for example, in Ottawa, if the City of Ottawa had a piece of land, and I'll give an example, let's say it's worth $5 million from a market value perspective, the government may decide to acquire that piece of land. The City of Ottawa would then have $5 million. The government could then lease that piece of land back to the city or a nonprofit, in which the $5 million can be invested. And there you can see an environment where you'd have the land for nothing and the market value of that land to invest in construction. And we hope that that will lead to a lot of opportunities to build affordable housing right across the country. And so while a lot of the details of that particular aspect are being worked out following the budget, but that's the ambition to be able to contribute to the housing crisis. So I think I've said a lot there on those three big buckets. Glad to answer questions, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Again, I'm going to say something before you say something. Again, outlining the extraordinary assets we have to work with. Just before Stefan starts, everybody put one arm up. Put one hand up, everybody, including those guys on the board and the camera guys, everybody. Those of you buried in your phones, one hand up. Okay. Now, if you are working fully remotely, drop your hand. If you are in the office 1 day a week, drop your hand. 2 days a week, drop your hand. 3 days a week, drop your hand. 4 days a week, drop your hand. This is how many people are in their office 5 days a week in this crowd. Just take a look. Okay. Oh, now you're all changing your votes. Oh, yeah, wait a minute. Wait, I didn't realize it was a test. I just want us to keep in mind we are part of something much larger. Something much larger is happening, and foot stomping and complaining and finger wagging hasn't worked out so well. So let's pay attention to what we see happening, and let's hear from Canada Lands about their contribution to this, supporting this transition we're all in. Go ahead, Stefan.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to my colleagues from Parliamentary Precinct of being able to restore tough have to follow. I feel for Mark, the story you just say, I feel this myself a year and a half ago saying the same story to this crowd. And but I'm happy you got your 1.1 billion to accelerate that and make it real. When you think about that, the payback is less than a year when you think about that when he's completed. And that's going to free up a lot of building, a lot of site for potential housing or mixed-use property. And that's a little bit what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about two things, primarily our presence in Ottawa, federal presence, and our present, Canada Lands Company, and the future post-budget 2024. What does that mean for us and everything that Mark just announced? So Canada Lands Company, we're not the federal government. We're owned by the federal government. We have one shareholder. It's the federal government. We're arm's length corporation, so they tell us what to do once a year. When we do our corporate plan, we send it in to the Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada, goes to the Minister of Finance, and do they agree with what we're planning to do? When they stamp it, we go. In there's also a borrowing authority and all this, because we are a commercial crown corporation. We borrow money, we develop, we partner with the private sector to develop land and to reintegrate government property into the communities. And we've been doing that. Next year, it's going to be 30 years. I had the pleasure of being there a year last week. And for me, it's a fantastic journey. And what's coming is even more exciting. CLC can take part in reviving downtown Ottawa, can take part in reviving all the downtown, in fact, that were on the screen just a moment ago. So that commercial crown operates across the country. We have 27 property, 23 major real estate projects across the country, and 4 attractions: Old Port of Montreal, the Montreal Science Centre, the CN Tower in Toronto, and Downsview Park. And CN Tower is also a precinct. We have a fair amount of land where there's baseball games are happening. But bringing you back to Ottawa, I'm sure you're not that concerned about Toronto right now. Bringing you back to Ottawa, here's our presence in Ottawa. And I'll go through a little bit of the slide. That's our current presence. That's not our future presence. And I'll go through each of the property to give you an idea of what's happening. The market is not the market that we knew before the pandemic. And Boot Street's a good example of that. We have a full square on Boot Street where we had approval from the city to start building in 2019. We had approval, we have zoning, we have everything. Complex site because a lot of buildings are heritage, so we cannot just bulldoze them. Sometime I would like to, but I won't say it out loud. I haven't said that. Did I? But we have to maintain. So 4 or 5 of the building will stay and will change their utility. So when you go to market with that and you approach a developer, they think twice about getting. So we had that property sold. I won't name the developer. They're not in the room. I was happy for them to get in Ottawa, and you know, they did their due diligence. They did, and then the interest rate and all of that, and the deal fell through this year. Am I happy that it fell through? We didn't sell it. Yes and no, because back then we went to market with 10% affordable housing in all of our projects. Now we're going with 20% minimum because our shareholder says we should do more. So the minimum is 20%, and you'll see more closer when we can. When it's financially viable also for our partner, the developer, will go to 30% if we can. So that's an interesting property. If you're a developer, it's coming back on the market, and you can come and talk to me after. Maybe we can make a deal here. Carling Avenue, we're in partnership with the Algonquin of Ontario on this property, and this should finalize this year, and we're hoping to start building on 299 Carling by the 25, I hope. We have because it's an older property that we've sold, we're gonna have 15% affordable housing. 600 units will go on that site. Erin Road, that Federal Study Center, for those that are as old as me, I had course there at some point in my career. Federal Study Center, beautiful property. It's we had public consultation. It's with the city right now. We're hoping, and there's a table at the city here. It's right there, fantastic. Hello. We're hoping to have approval rezoning by the spring. Spring is up to June 21st, so spring 2024, so we can start pushing forward with that site. And I'm looking at my team because I think there's 800 units there coming up and over 20% affordable housing. Much needed affordable housing in the city. A lot of these buildings are also heritage, so we're planning to keep 4 or 5 of them. You know, rebuild. That's going to become a really nice neighborhood. When we're building a neighborhood, and I'll get to the neighborhood after, I'm at the neighborhood after. Mona is just looking at me. This is in her writing. This is a fantastic, that's what and if you have a chance and go visit Waterridge, this is what we're trying to build when we're when we're acquiring federal property from the government of Canada. And I have to say at market value, because we do pay for these property. That's what we're trying to create. We're consulting the population. We're trying to create parks in there. We pay for the parks before we turn them over to the city. Some of the I took my grandkid to play in some of our parks. Some of the most beautiful park I've seen in my life in those neighborhoods. We make room for school. I think there's at least 2 schools in Waterridge that we're building. And we're also 3 schools, she's telling me. Thank you. And we're also looking for a mix of affordable housing. We don't want to have just affordable housing wall to wall. These people need to live in a community and benefit from all level of society living in a community. And that's what we're trying to build here. Ottawa Community Housing has built 271 units. Most of them are completed. We have multi-faith housing with a veterans house. We have Habitat for Humanity that are also in that neighborhood. To me, there's a poster child of what a neighborhood should look like. And tomorrow, Madame Fortier is going to announce that we're going to, because of the federal, there'll be 500 more affordable units being built in Waterridge. So just wanted to let you know. So that's going to happen. I'll talk a little bit about how. So thank you, Madame Fortier, for all your, and there's a little bit of you in that neighborhood because I know you've been pushing for having the right mix of population, the right mix of usage, and that's what we should be creating. We don't want to go back to Brooklyn in the 1960s, and I don't know, I wasn't born in 1960, but anyway, I know what it looked like. But, sorry. But I think we need to look at mixed-use community where everybody feels welcome and feel they could have a roof over their head. Two more projects that I want to touch on really fast. Confederation Heights. We're working with our colleague at PSPC, really thinking of going faster in the development, you know, because Mark talked about the 5, 10, you know, by the time we get it, it's been 9 years. Then we have 3-4 years of planning before we get the approval from the city to move forward. So now what we're trying to kickstart is start planning. We know some of these buildings are empty and some will become empty, but there's a lot of land. So how can we plan and do a mixed-use community on these land and bring that forward to the population? So that's what we did with the Confederation Heights, and that's what we're doing with Tony's Pasture also. And we're preparing on those two to go back to the community to present a master plan and go to the city after that to have a zoning of a community. So, and this is to really kickstart the redevelopment of those projects. What's next? You've learned 4 things I'm going to talk about budget 2025. First of all, authority for CLC. Canada Lands Company, what it looks today, what it will be looking like tomorrow, I'm not sure yet. I will tell you that in a few months. But Budget 2024 announced that CLC could now, we used to, as I said, buy from the federal government at market value to work with the cities and rebuild, rezone, rebuild, and develop large property, small, large property. Now it gives us the authority to redevelop underused property. It gives us the authority also to redevelop used property like armories, the National Defense Armories, Canada Post, Post Office. If there's a potential, imagine yourself in a city that's grown around the post office, that's one story. Now maybe we'll put 10 more stories on top of that and make affordable homes. So it gives us a lot more authority. Before, we couldn't deal with Crown Corporation. In this budget, it gives us the authority to deal with Crown Corporation and work with them. So for us, it's basically strengthening. Ça élargit notre mandat vraiment pour qu'on puisse travailler avec tout le gouvernement fédéral, que ce soit des Crown Corporation, que ce soit des ministères, et ça nous donne aussi l'autorité de travailler sur des édifices et des terrains qui sont les terrains que Marc parlait tantôt. When they are not surplus, but the parcel could be used, we're going to be there to redevelop them with them. Second thing that's in the budget, it gives us $5 million to overall CLC. I'll keep that to myself. What does that mean, overall CLC? All my employees were quite worried when they see that. But it's really to work with Mark's team to accelerate disposal, accelerate redevelopment, and ensuring that we look at how can we reduce the cost of those land going to the private sector and redeveloping them, but reducing the cost of their transfer at the nominal value to CLC in there, and all of that. Another thing, it also announced that we will be making 5 property across the country two in Wateridge, for nominal value lease, where we're going to build those 500 homes in Wateridge. There's some across the country also. The objective there is really to help non-for-profit to acquire land. They don't have to put out the capital to be able to build. So that's one of the announcements that's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen across the country, I believe, and 5 property from our existing stock will be proposed to do that. And the last one is something we've done in Vancouver that I would like to see replicated across the country, is really make federal land or CLC land. There's a little bit distinction in the two, but still we're owned by the federal. Make CLC or federal land available for temporary housing, temporary modular housing. We did that in Vancouver. We built in 3 months with the province and the city of Vancouver. We've provided the land. We built a 97 unit for first home for people that were on the street. It supported housing and all that. It takes all level of government to do that, but we have plans to start with 4 sites across the country to do that. Think about that development, and even if we want to build fast, you can't build 300 acres in a year and a half, in 2 years, in 3. If you want to do it right, it's going to take 5 to 10 years, maybe 15. Well, let's take a parcel of land that we'll own for the next 10 years, and there'll be no development on it, and let's put temporary housing. I know there's going to be not in my backyard and blah, 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 but we have a housing crisis. I haven't heard that we had an office crisis. We have a housing crisis. This will also give us the authority to start conversion of building, working again with the private sector to do conversion of building. Good news also in the budget, our colleague at CMHC also got some funding, low financing for conversion of building. So that could help to bridge the gap when the math doesn't work right now. When you do the pro forma, you can be able to do the math, and now with support from CMHC, working with us, we can make it work. Thank you very much.
I think that blah, blah, blah is a very common term in city building. You know, blah, blah, I get it, yeah, yes, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's interesting just to hear the 3 of you talking about the federal presence in this city, which is unique to anywhere else. And I sometimes look at you as you're sort of Ottawa's older brother, you know, who used to always, you were always there, and you came to family dinners, and you're quiet, and you got lots of food for yourself, and you know, everybody enjoyed your company, but you didn't say much. But now you've got them kind of going, hey, bro, like we need some help here. So interesting for us to just hear from you. How do you see the role? You've each come at it from 3 different perspectives. What particularly unique role do you think Canada needs to have in this city, in terms of the future of this city? How do you see that breaking down? Jennifer, you pretty much laid out an enormous investment that's enriching this city. But any particular principles that you're putting into play when you think about dealing with your host, this place?
Sure, I'll give it a go. So our boundaries in the work and influence that we are quite distinct because it's the parliamentary boundary. But as you can see, there are 3 key areas where we have a very significant input. And, you know, maybe we've been perceived to be quiet in the past, but I would say in the precinct, we've never tried to be quiet about the work we have done, and we've always been very open to partnerships and strategic alliances to help get that work done and cognizant of our impact on others. So first and foremost, Parliament is within the city boundaries, and not just within the city of Ottawa, but important to the National Capital Region. One, because it is the center of the federal government and will continue for the foreseeable future, like for the next 100 years at least, because that's the kind of investments we're making, will be key working buildings for our democracy. So unlike a downsizing, we're not going anywhere, and we don't intend to go anywhere, and we want to make sure that what we're doing there works with and that we have support from those that are around us. So in terms of the parliamentary program, safe, secure support to parliamentarians to make sure our democracy functions is our primary purpose. But Parliament has a very big mandate in terms of its outreach. And so we're very dependent, and as you saw, for example, with the convoy, we're very dependent on other levels of government and with the city to make sure that that precinct remains safe and secure. And so we're looking for very strong partnerships in that area. And to that end, over and above that, the second key investment for us, an important aspect for us, is the impact of our economic development footprint. Not only are the investments we're making resulting in economic impact in a positive way for the region, because construction is very regionally focused, but we are trying to create a national footprint in terms of the manufacturing and supply chain, because it is a national project of importance. But we do understand, as I think most in this room, is that construction is very much, in terms of the labor that goes into it, is very much a region focused, and it's a very important driver for the economy. And so with those investments, and what we're trying to do here is make sure that the investments benefit well beyond that of the precinct. And that's where I think, you know, the opportunity that we're laying down, we're hoping will be picked up, is that when we create a Parliament Welcome Centre that's going to generate millions of visitors that come to our region, like we're like the Field of Dreams. If you build it, people will come. And so how do we make sure that, you know, what's going on around us partners with us and leverages that investment to make Ottawa and that particular neighborhood an even better place? The third piece, and it is still sort of in the economic development footprint lane, but is in the tourism. So not only are we creating an economic footprint in the work we're doing, but tourism is very important to the economy, and I suspect will become even more important as time passes, given some of the things we've talked about today. So making sure that, and you know, part of the stakeholder engagement that we do is we have regular engagements with Ottawa Tourism to tell them what we're doing, to figure out how we can work better together. This is why we do things like Open Doors Ottawa to open up our construction site. We've gone to, I would call it, extreme efforts to make sure that things like the sound and light show and the changing of the guard can occur, so that when people come to this city, they still see, they want to come to Parliament. It's a key tourism driver, and we can make it a better place. But all in all, at the end of the day, success for us is achieved when Parliament has the accommodations it needs, democracy is supported, Canadians and other visitors have a dignified welcome, and we are able to contribute to our community, and we have a strong partnership with our community in terms of making it a better place to visit, a better place to live. And we think what the work we're doing has the potential to create follow-on effect to make it a better place to live and work.
To live as well. You know, along with empathy, cities being about empathy, they're also fundamentally about hospitality, how we welcome others. And I'm looking at my BIA friends who deal with small businesses that are actually in the hospitality business, and that Welcome Centre is about Canada being hospitable. Can we talk about the second word that you mentioned, which is procurement? You guys are in the procurement business. Is there an opportunity to use procurement in a way that would strengthen local places and local economies? Mark first, and then Stefan.
Yes, I think certainly, and while it's not my area of expertise, the government is focused in a number of ways to leverage strategically all of the buying it has to do to make sure that it's focused and it's giving the maximum outcomes. And that's also what we're doing when we go out to tender for new space.
Sure.
So now, a little bit of context. Ottawa obviously has an overrepresentation of public servants vis-a-vis other cities. We know that. But every city, Calgary is a little bit of an exception because of the downturn in the economy. It had, coming out of the pandemic, over 40% in occupancy, which is one of the reasons why Calgary was one of the first cities out of the gate to convert empty office buildings into housing. And that really is a huge locomotive for to revamp the downtown cores, because obviously those people that are living there are spending money there. And that's I think that's certainly part of the solution for Ottawa. But cities like Montreal, for example, and same with Toronto and Vancouver, but Montreal had an inoccupancy rate before the pandemic of 2%, and now it's about 20%.
Right.
And it's going to keep going, of course, because people signed leases before the pandemic, often for 10 years. So it's a little bit like the subprime situation in the States. Is as leases are coming to be renewed, more and more folks are figuring out that, in most organizations, your number one spend is your people, and your second spend is your space. So reducing space, going to unassigned, not just for the public sector, but certainly for the private sector, making your business more profitable without increasing revenues. Everybody's in that business right now. So that change to how we view office space and how we need office space, that's not going away. That's the new reality. In Ottawa, obviously, we're hit harder because of the amount of public servants and because of the new hybrid environment, but not uniquely that, because as I indicated to you earlier, we were going to unassigned before the telework, and so there would have been a push for more efficiency in that regard. So because we're so heavily invested in Ottawa, because it's the Parliament, because ministers are here, and therefore deputy ministers are here, and assistant deputy ministers are here, and a large number of a lot of the operations need to be here. It's not exactly the case. It's not like it used to be, because technology now opens a lot of opportunities to leverage talent right across the country, and there is still a labor shortage, and the government does compete for talent, and so we have taken advantage of the flexibility across the country. But the public service has grown, and the numbers in Ottawa are important. And if you look at working with our colleagues from the National Capital Commission, we look at the demographics over the next few years, and the city of Ottawa is going to double in my lifetime. And so planning and thinking about what our office needs are going to be today, but moving forward, that's really important. But finally, the good news is those assets that we're going to be getting out of, that we own, will be really pushing to convert into housing. And so you can imagine a downtown Ottawa, not just downtown, but downtown Ottawa, with office spaces that are heavily occupied by public servants versus before they were half occupied. Now they're going to be over 80% occupied. And then office buildings that are now residential. Yeah, those folks are contributing to the local economy. So I think if I look at the future of Ottawa over the next few years, there's a hard transformation that's happening, but the future is very bright. And certainly from a public service perspective, we are planning for that bright future. And the space we're going to be retaining, we're going to be investing in and making sure that it's top quality and flexible. So I guess I'll stop there.
Intensification is just people. When in doubt, add people, right? When in doubt, add people. Stéphane, last word to you.
Okay, and I'll take my hat off of Canada Land. I'll talk for myself. Yeah. Mark has a plan, 10 years. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It started happening already. I know that. It was started to happen probably 2 years ago. He has a 10-year plan. The federal government represents 50% of the leasing market in Ottawa. It did anyway a couple of years ago. So is the impact of the federal government from an office standpoint is big. So we have a 10-year window to rally, come together, and I know the Ottawa Board of Trade has started to do that, are working on this. How can the community, it doesn't take only the federal government, it takes the business community, it takes the developer, it takes the building owners, it takes all of these people, the city, to come together, tous les intervenants, in order to build the Ottawa of the future. He's building a roadmap for 10 years, how he's going to reduce his presence and how he's going to consolidate his operation. Well, let's get in there and build that road. Make sure that we're all consulted while he builds that roadmap so we know what are the next steps. Primary school downtown Ottawa, family living downtown. Because let's face it, it's like, Washington. We're not the only city. Washington's living the same thing, and they're taking action to change that. So, Canada Land, now I'm putting my out of Canada Land. We want to contribute. Definitely, we want to make partnership with local supplier, with local developer, with people working in this community, because we're all about building communities, like mixed-use community. Let's make downtown Ottawa a mixed-use community, basically, and have people living there with their young kids. You know, we were talking earlier, said, oh, we build bachelor. How can you live in a bachelor with 3 kids? Well, we have to have a variety of people if we want to see people at 5 o'clock on the street, not leaving downtown, but living downtown, playing downtown, studying downtown.
You kind of hope if they're a bachelor, they don't have 3 kids, just saying, but...
No.
Listen, you know, the world is not a very hopeful place at the moment. It's a hard world at the moment that we're in. And I think what a wonderful thing to be part of a discussion like this about the future, about partnerships, about investment. And the antidote to that hopelessness is to engage with your neighbors and with people that you're partnering with to build something better. So may I just thank on your behalf, Jennifer, Mark, and Stefan for being good neighbors to Ottawa.
Thank you for the invitation to speak about what I call the low carbon energy transition. And note that I said low carbon, not zero. Under most net zero scenarios by 2050, and if you look at this for Canada, for example, the Canada Energy Regulator, the goal is only achieved with a significant contribution from offsetting activities, much of which is really only relevant at the national or provincial level. So in other words, the challenge, I think, for the cities such as Ottawa is how to radically reduce emissions by 2050, not necessarily to eliminate all of them. So my message to you this morning concerns what business should be doing, how to evaluate government strategies, how to constructively critique those strategies, and how to make smart things happen. The scale of the challenge, the net zero challenge for Canada, is bigger than anything public policy has had to deal with in our lifetimes. It is an energy revolution on the scale of the 3 big energy revolutions of the 19th and early 20th centuries, but this one driven by public policy. But scale only tells us so much. The scope extends to every corner of the economy and society, from energy production to energy use. So it's about big corporations, institutions like hospitals and universities, small businesses, and you and me in our homes and our cars. In other words, it is extremely complex and will in the end depend not just on technology, energy pricing and regulation, but on the very unpredictable thing we call human behavior. This should tell us something about the pace of change. Canada has agreed with the world community that we need to achieve enormous change in our emissions in about 25 years. But what we feel we should do is not the same as what we practically can do. Think of it this way, from 1991 to 2005, which is the baseline for our current targets, Canadian emissions grew from about 600 megatons of greenhouse gases to 730 megatons. During that time, during the time since 2005, we have seen 2 significant downturns. One associated with the 2008-2009 recession, another more recently with COVID. But the long-term story so far is slow growth and then stability, not yet enduring reductions. So we've got a steep hill to climb here. Our official target for 2030, 6 years from now, means we would have to lose about 300 megatons. Think of that, 300 out of the 730. About 5 times the net change over the past 17 years. In my estimation, it is almost certainly impossible for our physical economy to adjust that fast.
As we navigate through an era marked by rapid technological advancements, environmental challenges, and evolving societal needs, the importance of incorporating the voices of the younger generation into our municipal decision-making process has never been more paramount. Our actions today forge the world they will inherit tomorrow. Hence, it is not just a privilege, but a responsibility to engage with them from a young age. Today, I am thrilled to explore how we can open avenues for our youth to contribute their fresh perspectives, innovative ideas, and untapped energy towards shaping the urban environments and communities they are set to lead.
So I think progress might have been slower in Ottawa as a reflection of the more individualist mindset, where a lot of different stakeholders like government bodies, different organizations, and the private and public business community have worked individually towards achieving this goal, rather than adopting a more unified and collaborative approach between different stakeholders, resulting in a more slower progression towards this designation as compared to other cities around Canada and in the world. I know that this initiative has been on Youth Ottawa's radar for some time now, but has become clear that it needs to be a citywide initiative, and community members involved in both the private and the public sector working together and collaboratively in order for this to come into fruition.
I think right now that I'm working for a community resource center, we can see that one of the challenges is the access to the funding. First, you need a lot of skills as grant writing and project management, and especially with grassroots organizations, it could be a little bit difficult to access to those opportunities. Also, when you're applying to big grants and a big amount of funding, you would need also the support of other bigger organizations. And right now, it's even difficult for those organizations to survive. So I can see that that part of the funding could be a little bit challenging, especially even though there's a lot of amazing programs and beautiful projects, but accessing to those funding, it's a big challenge that we have to tackle.
By involving youth, by creating and providing these meaningful opportunities for youth engagement, we not only leverage and tap into their creativity, but their energy as well too. And we ensure that our initiatives are truly representative of what youth aspire, their aspirations as well as their needs. So this means creating platforms where they can contribute their ideas, voice their concerns, co-create solutions alongside policymakers and community leaders. Moreover, when we inspire youth as leaders, this really fosters a sense of ownership and responsibility, and among them. And when they see that their ideas are being taken seriously and implemented, it instills a sense of pride and a motivation to continue doing the good work that they're doing in the community.